I need support staff to clear the room. Stand up and walk, now.
Hello and welcome to The Watch. My name is Chris Ryan. I am an editor at TheRinger.com, and joining me in the studio, taking himself to Madison Avenue, it's Andy Greenwald!
Hey man.
If I'm making advertising jokes, you know we're talking about Upfronts this week.
People love upfront talk.
We're going to talk a little bit about TV industry talk today. We're also going to do a little bit of Andor, lessons we've learned from Andor that maybe the industry could learn, or maybe they won't learn. So we're going to talk about the ripple effects of Andor as a kind of entity within the larger storytelling corporate enterprise, right? Maybe a little bit of Last of Us, because we didn't get your thoughts on...
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
on the WFLF this week, Washington Liberation Front. And I just want to tell everybody that you can watch us on YouTube. Ringer-TV is the channel. You can also watch us on Spotify, where you're hopefully listening to us. You can hit us up in our email. It's thewatch@spotify.com, and follow us on Instagram at thewatchpod_.
Can I also do a little bit of housekeeping? This might be breaking news for Kai as well, but I believe we've decided we will be putting up our next episode on Tuesday, right?
Next Tuesday.
Next week, yes. There won't be an
episode
episode
on Monday. Because I will be out on Monday.
Yeah.
I need a little bit of alone time with some other people.
Because you heard it was my birthday, so you were like, I gotta really give you some space.
This trip was made a very long time ago. Had I known it was your birthday, I probably would still go, but I would be much more...
to be clear, no matter when you chose this trip, my birthday was still my birthday.
But do you have what's my birthday?
November 17th.
And do you have it like where you're like, we can't do that for Thanksgiving because it's CR's birthday?
Yes. First of all, it's never Thanksgiving on your birthday. It's just the runway.
It's the next week though.
Yeah, which is a perfect time to do things.
But you do care about your birthday.
No, I care about you caring.
Yeah.
I'm passive but judgmental. I'm the best person to celebrate birthdays with. Can I also address the other elephant in the room? Which is
that how you feel about Last of Us? Passive but judgmental.
That's why I have the career that I've had.
It's true. It's true.
We are in a different studio today.
Oh yeah.
So people who are watching might notice this. It's a little strange. It's a lot of air in the room. I feel like a lot of space.
Prefer that to the small cave that we were in for a long time.
I like to be able to focus. This is it's also very bill coded.
Yeah, well, we can bring our own stuff in here if you want to have like a little picture of like
Nick Foles
Terriers as ratings from 2012.
I actually do have that picture. It's right behind the Rock'em Sock'em Robots. You can't see it.
Just like maybe we could put up a big, poster of the Americans or something, whatever you want.
So you want to because I said when we walked in that this felt like Grantland days, you feel like we should have only content that we covered on Grantland?
Yeah.
Just Downton Abbey merch?
Rust from True Detective.
That's your guy.
Yeah, man. So I wanted to talk to you about Upfront. So for people who don't really follow the trades and follow the way these things work, is the networks traditionally go to
historically
advertisers and say, hey, here's what we have coming up for the next year. Please buy some ads on our network. Now it's become a little bit more of, I think, a play to the street, that being Wall Street, trying to entice Wall Street, goose stocks. Talk about what you've got coming up, but so many of these quote unquote networks are also technology companies. So you see a lot about iterations that they're making in their products, as well as, Netflix, for instance, did an Upfront, and Sean McNulty, who writes a newsletter every morning called The Wake Up Through the Ankler, is really good at sort of summarizing a lot of this stuff. And he noted with great interest that Netflix was largely about their ad suite. They were like, we have like a lot of content coming. Like I believe Sean used the word tonnage, but
they
the
made
most
a lot of
important
announcements.
thing is the ad suite, and it was like an ad forward. Like here's how to buy ads here, 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 and here.
I mean, that was the room for it. They also said like 2 more seasons of Bridgerton and Diplomat is coming back, and 4 seasons. It's going to be 8 seasons.
Yeah.
2 seasons of television.
2 seasons of TV, but 8 seasons of a year, unless they change the format and it becomes more of an Andor thing, and it's like 5 years, but each episode is a year.
Oh my God, right. And it's just like 2 years BBB, and it's before the Battle of Brunch, because that's the stakes of that show.
That's right.
Amazing.
You didn't finish that, did you?
I've still got a season to go.
I would say the stakes get larger.
Oh.
Yeah.
I actually have a feeling about those stakes.
Okay.
I could see it coming a little bit.
Okay.
Part of my passive judgment. Look, I'm not going to react, but
the
I feel
biggest
it.
story to come out of Upfronts this week by far, especially for 2 guys like us who have been there since when, and just like that was actually Sex in the City. You know, that's how far back we go.
Wow.
Is that Max, formerly known as HBO Max, is now in the future to be known as HBO Max because they are adding back HBO to their title. Now, there has been a few different variations on this in terms of what is just the streaming service called. Is there a bifurcation within the network or within the streaming service for popular fare or populist fare versus the prestige scripted and sports and documentary content that HBO is so well known for? Ultimately, I think that this is, I guess, a good thing. It's a good thing. It's not like I was like, I had just gotten used to Max. I had reorganized
I felt that way a little
my
bit.
tiles on my Apple TV. No, tell me what you think.
I actually still have the HBO Max tile. So I wonder if it'll just fire back up again.
I think I do still have an HBO Go tile.
I have an HBO. Yeah, I have an HBO Now.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
I like to hold on to my tiles.
Well,
right.
It goes to show you never know.
It's true. It's true. You think something? What else is going to come roaring back?
Well, isn't there like a Twin Peaks line about like that thing you like is going to come back in style?
That gum you like
That
is going to
gum
come
you
back in
like,
style. Yeah. There is a Twin
that
Peaks
streaming
thing.
service is going to come back in style.
There's a Twin Peaks.
All
for
right,
that.
brother, you hear this news?
Yeah.
I'm going to Charlie Rose it, and you say
okay.
what?
Well, I'll say that. Is that how Charlie Rose did it?
Oh yeah, you've never seen me do Charlie Rose? I stopped doing it because it became inappropriate, but
well, it didn't.
He
become
became inappropriate. But I was like,
he ruined your bit.
His whole thing would be like Daniel Day-Lewis and Paul Thomas
yeah.
Anderson, and he would be like, he writes the script, he gives it to you, and you say what?
And then it's pretty good.
Yeah. And he leans over and goes, and you say what?
By the way, it's okay to bring that back now. HBO Max is back. Also, racism is back. You can say anything now. So you can, it's cool. You can be Charlie Rose. It's fine.
Okay.
As a white man in my 40s, I give you permission.
Thank you.
It's okay.
Thank you for seeing me.
This is a safe space. That guy agrees with me. Anyway, well, it's interesting. So our buddy Casey Bloys, the chairman of HBO and Max Content, was on, we talked about this on our pod. He was on Matt Bellamy's pod, and he was talking
The Town.
On his podcast, The Town. And in retrospect, he must have just been biting his cheek the whole time because clearly he knew this was coming. And you can sort of read the tea leaves of what he was saying. We commented on it, right? Which is that the bet on renaming the service Max after the Discovery merger / acquisition was that this would be the new catch-all for an entire suite of entertainment, from your Game of Thrones to your Dr. Pimple Popper.
Is that the only Discovery show you know?
I think it's the funniest one to mention.
Yeah.
He mentions it. I believe there's also a bunch of Magnolia type content.
Yeah, it's like,
What are those called? Home for the
look
Holidays.
what I did with Larry McMurtry's library.
Well,
That's my favorite.
that's true. You just see like kindling in a boutique hotel.
Wallpaper.
Great.
Is that it? Gutenberg Bible? Yeah.
Larry McMurtry owned. That was the play. And I thought it was interesting, and we commented on it on our pod, that Casey was like, the data has proven otherwise, that this is no longer a competition for first place. That is really a Netflix. Netflix was there first, and they're parked there. That it's really a competition for runner-up. And the best thing going for them is the HBO content. That is what drives subscriptions. The other stuff might be nice. There are certainly people who watch everything that's available on Max or multiple styles of shows, but the HBO prestige television stuff is what drives the brand. So you could read the tea leaves on that putting HBO back in the title is kind of a no-brainer.
Sure.
I actually feel like it's kind of another half step. Just call it HBO. One of the other takeaways from this week was that ESPN is launching its direct-to-consumer service.
ESPN.
And it's just called ESPN. And this is kind of like a galaxy brain zag that makes sense.
I gotta admit, I don't think I'm gonna sign up for that. I'm still so mad that I think
Yeah.
I'm getting charged like 3 times for ESPN Plus.
Oh, I definitely am. And also, there was that period
And
when
I still can't sign in to read like mock drafts.
There was like 6 months ago when I was in a real pickle, and I think I probably texted you, my tech support guy, where I was like, how can I watch this Monday Night Football tilt between our Philadelphia Eagles and whomever? And what I did in order to watch it was sign up for Field Yates's insight into like draft order in 2027.
Yeah.
So I was able to read our old pal Ben Solak, but I still couldn't watch the game.
Right.
So I messed up.
Right.
Anyway, this is all headed towards that place, right? That like, I think that the market has decided whether the brand value of HBO still matters and whether it has been diluted by The Big Bang Theory sharing a screen with it? And I think the answer to that is no. I think a lot of the sort of fixed brain stuff that legacy media brands have held on to for a long time, like Disney saying, "Oh, we can't have swears on a network with Disney in the title." Right. They've let that go, and now eventually it'll just be, do you subscribe to Netflix, HBO, Disney? Kind of where it always ought to have been headed, right?
Yeah, I think if I had one thing, just as a common man who's not in these boardrooms, doesn't go to lunch, you know what I mean? Like
you never eat lunch.
Nobody asks me to go to lunch. But if I had to give one piece of advice to all the non-Netflix streamers, is clean it up. There's just too much confusion about what is where, when it airs, how many of them are going up, and where I find it once I turn the thing on. And I do say that as somebody who professionally covers this and follows this and watches as much as I possibly can. I think when you start getting into, this is a tile inside of Disney, this is a tile inside of Max, but we know that the reason most people are coming to Max is actually for Last of Us or Night of the Seven Kingdoms, although they'll have to wait a while for that. I think that anything that these companies can do to disentangle themselves from a lot of the corporate tech speak that infected a lot of these, basically a lot of these services from the get-go would be really beneficial. I do want to throw something at you though. I was just doing a rewatchables the other day. I guess I can just say it was Close Encounters, and because he got announced, but we were talking about how like we are farther from Close Encounters, the movie now, than the people in Close Encounters were to World War II, because World War II comes up a couple of times in Close Encounters. And I was thinking about this in relationship to a lot of the way that we talk about television, the way that we talk about these networks, where are we actually getting to a point now where when we're like, what's NBC doing? It's like, actually no one cares. Like there are most people in the world do not have a relationship with NBC as a place where they go to get comedies.
No, not anymore.
No, right?
And that's
so what's more
though.
important is that they get Peacock to work.
At this point. But now that's actually more like sunk cost fallacy, right? Like we botched that. It's kind of like Paramount, Viacom spent years ignoring Comedy Central, MTV, and now they are dead brands.
Right.
That's gone, and you can't really bring it back. I think that it's actually, I think we're saying the same thing, because I think that Warner Brothers Discovery, now there's a secondary level of intrigue about this, that like by putting HBO back in the name and sort of divorcing it a little bit from Discovery,
like a split? Is
there going to be another sales or split? And that's very possible. We certainly have no idea about that. But yeah, leaning into what you do have rather than nostalgia is important. But B, HBO still does seem to have some sort of connection for some, not just us, and it means something. So lean into that, because Max is a nothing.
Yeah.
It's a meaningless thing. And that is the bigger lesson. It's funny you're talking about like things from decades ago, because what we were just saying about like people getting precious about, well, we don't want our legacy brand to be, to be tarnished by this new media play or whatever. And I even kind of parroted that line when HBO Max became Max, which was I tried to see the logic behind protecting HBO.
Sure.
We recently, you and I did, and then I was texting you like some images from the old Wayback Machine about our old days at spin.com 25, 26 years ago. And that was, the only relevance here is not how much you loved the band Party of Helicopters. The only relevance here is,
still do.
It's that, so I was like nominally like the editor of spin.com. And the people at Spin Magazine were like, we want nothing to do with you and your grubby little computer site.
Yeah.
So we were essentially running our own pirate top 10 list of what was good that year. Shout out Primal Scream Exterminator. Completely divorced from the content of the magazine, which was a loser for all sides, right? It's just, you kind of have to roll with it and allow the thing to become what it's going to be.
I think there's a lot of
next.
intelligent stuff happening across the board. You can see The Pit, for instance, is going to be airing on TNT in the fall.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, they're like Andor aired on various Disney terrestrial networks at one point over the course of the last year. They've tried to do it. People are doing smart things with multi-platforming and getting the shows in front of people where they think they might enjoy them. But I think what gets complicated is when what would be a good example of this? I think actually the Disney Hulu FX stuff is the stuff that's probably most confusing because there are people who are like, well, FX is still a cable channel, but a lot of stuff that FX does is only on Hulu. And Hulu is Hulu, but Hulu is also on Disney Plus. Like that is a message that I don't think you're ever going to be able to untangle, except for the possibility that you can still sort of sneakily sell Hulu to people who would get Hulu anyway if they just had Disney Plus. Like, I don't know exactly like how many childless people out there are like, I don't want any access to the original trilogy of Star Wars. Do you know what I mean?
Wasn't that bill until like last week?
Yeah, but like we're not actually good barometers of this because like we are like, I need to be a part of all of this to see where it's going. Well, I think for an average person who's like, I got like $50 maybe to spend after Netflix, like, I don't know. Like,
well, one thing to think about is this is not necessarily saying that we should be, this is not a play for sympathy, but the Byzantine way these companies were set up and structured and restructured and sold means that there are a lot of like vestigial departments that are still actively functioning as different arms of what is increasingly the same company. Yeah. So the FX programming team, who we laud constantly, John Landgraf, Nick Grad, Gina Balian, they are programming FX, and sometimes FX goes on Hulu. Hulu has its own programming team that has 9 Perfect Strangers season 2 coming, and that is not, they don't touch each other. There's a larger argument to be made, and maybe we can get to it later when we talk about Andor, that like, when you ask the question, is Andor a success? My pet theory is that it is very successful and important to the larger Disney corporation, more so than it is to the Lucasfilm project, which is distinct within that larger ecosystem. Yes. Similarly, we're talking about confusion. So at the Upfronts this week, we learned that the Greg Daniels penned Office
the paper
spinoff / offshoot. I think the poster says from the universe of the takeaway is clearly that it is like the documentary team is doing this again. That will be premiering on Peacock this fall. We also learned that there's a new Tina Fey executive produced show with Tracy Morgan and Daniel Radcliffe called The Fall and Rise of Reggie Dinkins. Great name. And that's an NBC original comedy.
Yes.
You will be able to watch it on Peacock.
Sure.
Will someone who likes one likely like the other in the same way that they liked watching 30 Rock and The Office back to back on NBC? Probably. The fact that they are completely different with different expectations and different headwinds, I don't think that matters to your friend Joe $50, but it does affect his
sorry
viewing.
For being friends with the common man.
You're
who have multiple streaming services.
Okay, Josh Hawley.
I would be really into a senatorial commission on streaming services. I would watch that on C-SPAN or on Peacock, wherever it happened to be broadcasting.
Exactly. We wouldn't be able to find it. But I mean, most senators are over the age of 70.
Yeah.
So would it be like telling my parents about slow horses, in which I explain in like beautiful, granular detail, and they're like, more or less, this sounds like a dream. Like this is everything I would like.
Yeah.
And they say, what channel is it on?
I know.
And then I'm like, the whole House of Cards collapses.
My mom has Apple TV,
and
I have given her access to like any streaming service that she pretty much wants. And she still uses her Samsung's voice command to open up like Xfinity on demand to watch anything. And I'm like, Mom, you can watch like all of Andor. Anything basically ever made in the history of your life is right in this little black box.
Yeah.
And she's like, I understand. What time does Andor come on?
That's beautiful. Have I told you that I recently heard from my mom? She called on the landline to tell me that she had gotten
Your
a new
landline or hers?
that she had gotten a new iPhone. I was like, great.
Yeah.
Great. Are you going to store it with the last 3 that you bought over the last 15 years? But once they battery died, you never turned on again? And she's like, well, I'm very excited about this new one. I was like, okay, great. Are you into the Genmojis? Like, what's the deal? Yeah. And she said, the
Apple
new
AI,
one,
you're feeling that?
She said, well, with the new phone, it can play music, not just have a telephone ring.
Wow.
And I was like, sounds good. I'll be sure to keep calling you on the landline.
Just start sending her some playlists.
Oh, that would be so sick. CR's hardcore playlist 2025.
Yeah.
It's going to be great. Any other?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about
stuff?
Night of the Seven Kingdoms moving out of 2025 to 2026. And
so a year without Thrones. How are you taking it?
A year without Thrones, and also the the thing that the biggest shows on TV now fall into, which is like you just can't run every year. So you're basically going to have the pit, the industries, like the shows that are like about people doing pretty normal jobs in places where you can film that don't involve a tremendous amount of VFX. But I wanted to know whether or not this felt to you like it's not ready, or we could use it more in 2026. One of the most valuable things that Casey said to us when he came on the show was the long-term thinking he's responsible for in terms of the schedule. So that when he's looking, when we're like, oh, I wonder what's coming on in the fall, he's thinking about the fall of 2027.
Yep.
Does this strike you as something, because the whole, I thought, value proposition of Night of the Seven Kingdoms was that it's essentially like people talking underneath of like trees and meadows and stuff.
Right.
And like walking around a lot. So
sounds amazing.
Sure. But like, do you think this is hey, we could use this more next year, or is there?
I don't know. I have no insight or intel about this production. And I think that what we will end up probably getting fed is whatever spin is most suitable. Like maybe this is because of production issues, but they'll say, what's great about this is it can be a ramp up into House of the Dragon season 2, so we can connect the two shows in viewers' minds and they get used to it. Or it's to say this way we can get into production on season 2 faster, and then it can be a little bit more reliable.
Right.
But now that we figured out how to make it, I don't know. I think that generally the best case. Actually, I was about to say one or the other, but in fact, they're almost always connected. Like, if there are production problems, then I think Casey and his team, like Franny Orsi, are like, okay, well, what are the advantages here? How can we play this to lay to our advantage and plug holes in the schedule?
I had thought it was going to be this summer, which is why it was surprising. It was apparently originally supposed to go later in the year.
Yes.
So maybe it's not that significant of a jump in the first place.
I think the thing,
but they had it in the coming soon on HBO montage, so I think everybody.
I think
was
it is a
starting
surprise.
Yeah.
But I think I think Kaya laughs when I say this word, not to glaze them too much. I got a little one. I've been counting, by the way. We've been doing pretty well today, but I think you're ahead of me.
I have a mic now too, by the way.
You have a mic now?
I do.
Yeah.
Yes, I love
I'm
this.
muzzled.
Silence.
Yes.
Any thoughts on Charlie Rose, Kaya?
Any thoughts on senatorial hearings?
Oh, I just lost my mic.
That's weird. That I think that the long-term thinking that is going to be most crucial going forward is to have the balance, is to have a schedule that has enough dependable meat and potato shows that can run every year to allow you the luxury of the every 2-year heavy hitter summer blockbuster type thing. HBO seems to be pivoting into that rhythm successfully. If you look at someone like FX, who, as we often say when we talk about FX, they don't have the same budget as HBO does. Shogun, I believe, is going into production on season 2.
Production.
No, I think it's in pre-production. I think it was just announced that it's going into production in Vancouver at the end of the year, or even.
Oh, I thought they were like, we are now in production on Shogun. You're probably right. Given like the global warming, you kind of need to have like a, you know what I mean?
Wow, you are political today.
No, I just mean it's Shogun doesn't feel like a very summery show. If you were shooting it in Vancouver in Japan, like you'd probably want to have like some foliage and stuff. I guess you could put it in Vancouver.
No, they're shooting in January in Vancouver.
There you go.
And anyway, if they're shooting January 26, that means
that show's coming out in 27 at least.
I think if we're being honest, it's 27. And so much of the rosy glow of FX at the moment has been like, oh, what an incredible year they had last year with, dominating all the categories at the Emmys. And Shogun is repeatable. It is an ongoing series.
Apparently, yeah.
But 3 years between seasons, you need to fill in the margins around it. So, and obviously they've announced other things too, and they have the shows, but having, I think it's increasingly obvious that you need a pit in order to do a House of the Dragon. Here's my last thought that I just wanted to throw at you. This is kind of adjacent to what we're talking about, but before we get on to Andor and other shows, I just wanted to say this. I think sometimes we have these conversations and I'm like, is this of interest to the larger community of people who are like, what did you guys think of Last of Us? I don't really care what you think of like Wall Street and tech and all this other stuff. And I think that's true, but I do think that these things affect how people watch things. And I also think that how people watch things and how they're programmed by these streaming networks
tells us something about how the majority of people who watch television watch things. Like I was thinking about, it's been brought up a few times, why hasn't Netflix done more internal verticals? Curation, being like, this is all Netflix original global. You can find things by category, but they haven't really like
they branded
internally
their prestige
branded
shows
stuff.
a certain way.
Yeah, right, exactly. And clearly, like Netflix would do anything if they thought it would drive their stock price up, bring in subscribers, create more value. They obviously don't want to do that. Like they have several of the biggest shows on television that they release in one night because they know that's how people want to watch them, regardless of whether it frustrates people who talk about people watching them.
Yeah, they don't care.
So obviously Netflix has kind of the inside track on like how people are actually watching television, thinking about television, what they care about when it comes to when they open up the sort of the app, what they want to see. And so when we get into these conversations about like, oh, it's so complicated to find, the English teacher. I don't know. I mean, like maybe it would make more sense if everybody was just like, here's all the shows we have, and that's how people actually want to like receive this stuff.
But I think the other takeaway from this week is that for as much as we have spent over 10 years talking about a very particular segment of television, prestige-ier, streamier kind of fare that engages us, I think that we've often, I don't know whether it's a straw man or just sort of a point on the horizon, we said, but it's worth noting that, the Dick Wolf franchises are still dominating on NBC and get large audiences and et cetera, et cetera. That the idea that there's some sort of still foundational beachhead of a certain meat and potatoes, I've used that twice, I must be hungry, but like television that exists. And the main takeaway from this Upfronts felt very existential because with the shift in sports media rights and the resultant like the ripples,
the NBA going to NBC for the purposes of this conversation.
Yeah, so for the purpose of this conversation, NBA spent billions to bring the NBA back to its airwaves, and not just airwaves, to NBC, to Peacock, across its platforms. And one of the first dominoes from that is massively fewer television shows.
In fact, I think the only scripted stuff on NBC right now, I mean, aside from the Tracy Morgan thing you just mentioned, is Dick Wolf's universe of Chicago shows.
And Law and Order shows.
Yeah. I think is like, I think it's just like The Voice, reality stuff, and sports now.
And that's what's left.
Right.
That's radical. And then you hear like, Jimmy Kimmel always does a bit, or Seth Meyers usually does a stand-up at the NBC Universal Upfronts, and Jimmy Kimmel is at the Disney Upfronts. And if you read, or I don't think you can see, but you can read some of their bits, I mean, it's rough. Basically Jimmy Kimmel being like, you guys are all morons and we've got nothing left for you, basically.
Right.
Like, this is it.
Yeah.
It is, I mean, the positive spin is that it is existential shift in the industry. And it might, quote unquote, work, but it does sort of redefine what TV is and what it's going to be.
It's hard for me to imagine a world in which, even if it is somehow better than The Office, the paper ever achieves the kind of impact that The Office did.
Because of the opportunities people will have to watch it and engage with it.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's not going to be good. In fact, I'm secretly kind of bullish on it. But maybe this all speaks to our larger point of, let's be honest about what we're capable of doing, what the reach is, even if that means reducing our expectations. Wait, isn't that what Trump said about the economy?
Well, you know what? This is actually a very appropriate way to segue into Andor and into the sort of ripple effects and the lessons of Andor, because let's be honest about what the reach of that show was, and let's be honest about whether there's anything replicable about it.
Yeah.
Obviously, you did a lot of I think kind of shoe leather journalism about this. I'm being completely sincere.
Yes.
So I would love to kind of just clear out and set some picks for you here. But I think we could start here is, we're gonna try not to spoil too much of Andor, but I would recommend you watch the show before you listen to some egg-headed conversation about what it meant.
And we won't. I don't think we need to spoil it at all. But also I don't even know if we've officially said. I'm sure if you're listening, you're aware. But we did have Tony on.
Yes,
earlier in the week.
That was a full hour-long conversation. So if anybody is interested in that went up on Tuesday night, corresponding with the last 3 episodes of the series. Was Andor a success, or is Andor a success?
So I think this is the toughest question to answer, and it's still kind of premature. And to your point about doing shoe leather journalism, like I did talk to people in the industry, not people directly involved with the show, of course, but like what the perception of it was. And, you know, it is worth noting, not in terms of its like, this has nothing to do with any show's like bottom line or budget, but there are certain shows that shoot through the quote unquote industry, whatever that may mean at this moment, like wildfire, and do impact people's thinking. And I think I referenced that like 3 or 4 weeks into the pit, people were talking about it and referencing it in conversations and in pitches that had nothing to do with medical shows that were attempting to recreate the 90s. Andor is definitely at that level of conversation. You know, one of the executives that I spoke to who works at a rival company finished the season alone in his office yesterday morning because he didn't want to be left out of the conversation. Right. The question about whether it's a so what I did though, I basically, in considering that question, I came up with 4 reasons why this could never happen again, and also 4 reasons of optimism of what can be brought in.
Fantastic.
For your question about success, I sort of what I said before about I think that the impact of the show and the success of the show creatively, which is undeniable, and the conversation, and then hopefully the award chatter and nominations, which do matter internally to companies, I think is enormously valuable to Disney and its larger small screen scripted project. I think that it's a challenging question for Lucasfilm because it is so profoundly one of one. Because the bulk of Lucasfilm's business, and I don't say this pejoratively, is maintaining and propping up a legacy brand that sells a shit ton of merch.
Yeah.
That is historically for kids, not adults in the way that Andor is for. It kind of deviates from the brand's core purpose in ways that thrill us, but maybe even leave the most optimistic, sympathetic, even fanboy-ish people within the company being like, well, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
And I don't think that's necessarily a failing. I think the question about whether it's a success will actually be borne out by a lot of the award stuff and what happens. Although I did get the sense that the long gap between season 1 and 2 was beneficial to the show and to the show's bottom line because just existing on the service next to A New Hope and everything generates interest.
Yeah, and I think
it's a
also
steady performer, I think, on the service.
We're seeing this in contemporary film with Sinners, where the miracle of a film that doesn't have a 75% drop from its first week to its second week because people are telling their friends, you got to check this out. So it's still making like $20 million a weekend at least. I don't know that Andor could be considered a blockbuster on those levels, but I do think that Andor is a word of mouth success and that people are making a project out of watching it, are probably watching Rogue One, are spending a lot of time on the Disney app, connecting the dots. So yeah, I'm sure it's got some value in that sense.
So, okay, so let's go through this list. So here are the things that make this show completely unique, irreplaceable, Black Swan event. Sorry, but let's enjoy it while we had it. Number 1 is that like this show was not developed. And what I mean is like most projects that get to our screen, you know, almost always it's like a spark of an idea in the brain of a creator, of a writer, or pre-existing IP or whatever. But everyone involved, I think this sincerely with good faith, takes a lot of pride within this industry of like, we developed it together. We attached talent. We gave notes. We sort of steered it in the right direction. And that gets a lot of buy-in from the executives and even like the most thoughtful ones, right? Like we got it over the finish line together, and a successful dish has many cooks, many authors or whatever. This is not that, right? This is a God-level creator in Tony Gilroy saying, hey, there's a clear baton pass here. I can do this relay race. I can take the baton from this movie and create the character and get him to the end of it. And that's the assignment. And as he said to us on Tuesday, that's what he set out to do. And then he did it in ways that are just, you know, mind-blowing. But just that simple fact that he just basically, as he said to us, he wrote an email saying, well, here's what you do. And then they were like, okay, better go do it.
Yeah.
That is very, very unique. Second one is that it fell between the eras and imperatives of streaming in a way that won't be repeated. You know, again, he talked to us about this, but like when he wrote that email, it was go, go, go. It was the gold rush era. And everyone was trying to establish a foothold and prove how serious they were about shifting their entire business model on the fly. And so when you have a smart guy come in with a good idea, they were like, great. And then also this, and then also this, and then you get a movie and you get a TV show. That entire ecosystem changed. I mean, that was also pre-COVID, let alone pre-strikes,
but it was just like,
changes.
the money faucet is on full blast, because the more we spend on stuff and the more stuff we have, the more Wall Street likes it.
Yes.
So our stock price goes up.
It's growth.
Yeah.
That all changed radically while they were in production on the first season, which is why this went from being a 5-year project to a 2-year project.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Tony has also said he didn't think he had the horses to do 5 years, and he keeps referring to Diego's face as like moving in the wrong direction. And I'm like, I will go down that direction. That is a very handsome direction.
If I could look like Diego Luna 5 years from now, I would probably erase Andor from my mind if I could. I would just gladly trade that.
I don't see the issue.
I can't even grow a beard. You know what I mean?
But so that hitting that timing is so unlikely, and it'd be very hard to go back to that. This place where it's like, go as big as you can and just try not to break too much on the way out.
Yeah.
Like that attitude is definitely gone from all of these corporations. 3, and I feel like this one is kind of not controversial, but might be surprising. Kathy Kennedy, who is on her, supposedly, although we don't really see the timeline, has said she's retiring from Lucasfilm.
Yes. There's been some competing reporting about that. Yeah.
But much vilified for her tenure in charge of this company, and a lot of the blame for we certainly feel creative failures of the new trilogy.
Yeah, ultimately the buck stops with her. So yeah.
And some of the other TV projects. I'm not here to overly praise or overly bury someone who I've still never actually met or engaged with. But if you look at her track record and her success record in Hollywood, and also why she got the job, it is very old school producerial career.
Mm-hmm.
She's worked on some of the biggest movies with Spielberg and Frank Marshall in the 80s and 90s. And the job is to get everything to yes, to help creators get to yes on everything and make their dreams
reputation has been tarnished a little bit because of the fallouts that she seems to have had with various directors on various projects. So whether it's Colin Trevorrow on Rise of Skywalker or
Lord and Miller
on Solo, a lot of announced but then never realized projects with Rian Johnson, David Benioff, and D.B. Weiss.
If you were
Patty Jenkins,
if you were a Kennedy
Rogue Squadron is still flying around out there somewhere.
Yeah, well, you said the Death Star still exists. So, look, I think that the argument for the Kathy Kennedy apologists would be she completely trusts and empowers directors, but sometimes she trusts and empowers the wrong ones.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not saying that to be I have no knowledge of any of those interactions. Yeah. That was what an apologist would say, that like you have to know, you basically have to know how to drive the sports car you're being given the keys to.
Right.
Tony knows how to drive that car. He is a Academy Award nominated writer and director, and has a vision and has his team, and has been in the industry since that era and worked with a lot of, like, he's worked with Jerry Bruckheimer, like he's worked with the big dogs of old Hollywood. I imagine they have a great relationship. And if her legacy at Lucasfilm, on the plus side of the ledger, is she empowered this guy to do this thing, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. So it was a good match, let's say. None of this happens in a vacuum. That seemed like a very good producer-creator match. And not obviously not repeatable. The last one is that, and I really want to hear what you think about this, but like the idea that all of these massive IP universes are flexible enough to allow different shades of storytelling within them, that adult storytelling could exist, Andor proved adult storytelling could exist within Star Wars, but does it also suggest or imply that adult storytelling could exist within Marvel or DC or Lord of the Rings? And my gut reaction is no, both because of where those IP universes exist in terms of the bottom line of those companies. Like, Marvel needs to get Avengers money assembling again.
Yeah.
It's not about like, oh, let's really humanize S.H.I.E.L.D. or what was it? Jesus, I had it right at the tip of my tongue. Damage control. Like, we're going to fix the rubble. The other thing is that the nature of those universes, particularly Marvel, kind of invalidate the premise of Andor, meaning a spy series set, not even director bullshit spy series, but like, okay, let's really talk about like the CIA in the Marvel universe. It kind of just gets undone once Professor X is like, actually, he's lying. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas Star Wars had created, and this is something that Tony took advantage of, a universe where there are billions of people, some of them are walruses, and maybe 17 of them have ever seen a lightsaber.
Right.
So, okay, there's a lot of space there to tell a story. And I don't know if that's true. I want to know what you think about that.
That's a great question. I mean, Marvel has tried to do that. I mean,
Is that Secret Invasion?
That's what Secret Invasion was supposed to be. And you could make an argument that there were elements of that in Falcon and the Winter Soldier that they wanted or have talked about Winter Soldier being their like 70s conspiracy thriller. I think
that's Congressman Soldier to you.
That's true. You know, I can never get away from the hero part of superhero movies. And that ultimately, not only are they going to be super and trump whatever, like basically work a day conflict, trial and error, you know, drama that's happening on the streets of the world that they're talking about, that they can just fly in literally and stop a building from falling and then fix everything or read somebody's mind. But that ultimately Marvel has posited these people as heroic. Now, Andor culminates with several of our most beloved characters doing capital crimes, which is totally like my shit.
Yeah.
But is hard to sell. I mean, that is the adult part that you're talking about. Is like, can you leave this theater or this TV show with mixed feelings about what you've just seen, with mixed feelings about characters that you've invested in? I happen to think that that's how you deepen your relationship to those characters, is to be able to see them not in the best light, to not always be making the right choice, to not always save the day at the end. But, you know, it wouldn't be Empire Strikes Back if it happened all the time. And that's the thing. It's like, we talk about like, well, we want this darkness and we want to have this edge and we want to have this kind of like melancholy or sadness or like, you know, feeling that things aren't going to work out, so that when they do work out, it's really, really Ewok time. You know, like I think Marvel has not quite gotten there outside of Infinity and Endgame.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, I like those movies and generally, but in terms of the aim of the project and the capability of the project, it does make me think a little bit about, and we don't need to get too into it, but like the Superman trailer that dropped, the new Superman trailer. And I've been pretty bullish about this project. And the reason being, I just had a feeling that James Gunn gets what makes the character unique and interesting, which is kind of what Kevin Feige has done repeatedly with even obscure Marvel characters.
Yeah.
If you can just communicate it, the audience is on board. This trailer is the first thing that gave me pause, because this trailer is the first thing that made me realize that there's no universe, certainly not the DC universe or our universe, where this movie can just be about that one pure idea. This is one of the busiest trailers I've ever seen.
Isn't that the disease of modern life, though?
It's certainly, yeah. I mean, certainly
Isn't that like you went to Yankee Stadium to watch the Yankees be the Yankees, but instead you get sold like all this other stuff and all these other experiences that you're supposed to have? Like, like isn't Superman's not enough? Because if Superman's not enough, nothing is, right?
And I can't say it any better than that. There are moments in this trailer where I'm like, truth, justice, heroism, also just like the physicality of like him being so strong that when he falls, like the sidewalk crumples. I was like, it's cool and the visuals are cool, but also he's a beacon of truth and justice and the common man, but also he's an international criminal, and also he has an army of robots and a dog and 7 other superhero pals. And I was like, this just feels, I just feel stressed thinking about it.
You already start thinking, it's like, this movie's going to be how long?
And I guess I have to watch it to watch the next 7 movies, but like that kind of fatigue, when usually the opportunity is to do one good thing to start.
Sure.
And this isn't meant as a criticism of Superman. It's again a reinforcement of the idea that for as much as a show that cost hundreds of millions of dollars and had like multiple night shoots in Valencia, Spain, like this was kind of under the radar of the larger project.
Yeah.
It didn't have to teach us what the future of the Jedi-dom holds, right? It was just about connecting these particular dots.
I think there's even a more, just even speaking from the artistic creative side of it, there's a significant difference between characters and pieces on a chessboard of a shared universe.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a lot of people very rightly be like, man, I would love to see a prequel about X or a sequel about Y, or like, what about what's happened to these characters next? And I understand that desire because I have it as well.
Mm-hmm.
But these people were not extensions, they were characters.
Yes.
Like, and so when you watch a Superman trailer and you're like, that is a lot of fucking villains or allies that they're introducing,
Mm-hmm.
when it really does seem like Lex Luthor, Lois Lane, and Superman are pretty solid foundation to build a movie off of. It's happened before. I think the Marvel the Marvel issue and maybe even the DC issue is that you're making a movie to make more movies.
Yep.
Andor was made to tell a story that had a very fixed endpoint, which was the beginning of Rogue One.
Yep. And I think that ties into the things that I think should be lessons learned from it. Although I do just want to reiterate, one of the most shocking things that Andor has done for me personally is that it 100% made me a fanboy kid again in such a pure way.
It's actually been like a problem. Like, I should not be thinking about Star Wars this much right now.
But like, I just so purely and so naturally found myself watching those last few episodes. And we're not spoiling the show here for people who haven't finished it, but I was like, okay, but really Alexander Skarsgård could do the Luthen flashback show, right? I'm like I'm not arguing with myself. I'm dreaming about it because how cool would that be? Now, it won't happen and it shouldn't happen to the point that you made, but it's pretty exciting that the show that is supposedly engaging with our cerebral adult selves can also reawaken the other part of us. Okay, so here's the 4 lessons, and please, thoughts and comments. Number 1, and this might be one of the hardest ones for executives, is trust the ones who deserve trusting. Now, maybe knowing who to trust is accurate for the rebellion and also for veteran executives.
Sure.
Like, and maybe that is the special sauce that the people who've been together for decades, like the HBO team or the FX team, have. But I think the hardest things for smart execs to do, even well-meaning ones, is to get out of the way. And if you have a writer's room of super alphas, like 2 Gilroys, Beau Willimon, and Tom Bissell, like, let them cook.
Yeah.
If you hire Luke Hull from Chernobyl and you see what he does in season 1, honestly, give him his own corporate card. Because it's worth it. It is.
I don't think he was doing his own expenses.
No, but I'm saying let him.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Build what he needs to build because he is the best at what he does, operating at the peak of his craft. And again, we talked to Tony about this. He was an EP on season 2, which is not standard for production designers, but is well deserved.
Well, it sounds like he was also the first person to talk to Tony.
Yes,
about
the physical spaces.
You've written it. Let's start building out what Mon's wedding.
Yeah,
Mon's daughter's wedding looks like. Let's start building out. What are the nooks and crannies of Coruscant? Let's start building out what a prison looks like.
And let's, like, if you're talking about the Gorman Town Square, which is all you can afford to build, how do we maximize it? How do we maximize the story and the drama from the location or from the stage set? I just think it's a hard lesson to learn in anything in management, but sometimes it's the meddling you don't do that matters the most. 2 is kind of what we were speaking of. Like, adults want entertainment too. And I don't just mean within IP universes, because I think the curse of hand-holding, of 4-quadrant thinking, of how can we make this busier, pop more, in a way, kind of what we're saying about Superman, I think that is a disease that has infected almost all of our entertainment. And you see it in, and I think even the casual fans are starting to see it with, like, every show beginning with 3 months earlier. The most interesting thing happens, but that's not where our show begins. Begin your show at the most interesting moment.
Yeah.
Like, do that. We don't always need hand-holding or explanations. I think that reference, also to that end, reference points for what shows could or should be don't need to have, like, only an 18-month tail. Meaning, when we sit here and we talk about Andor and we get excited, we're talking about, like, British miniseries from 1981 or French films from the 60s or novels or history books. Like, if something excites you or historically has excited a group of people, it doesn't lose its special sauce just because it's not within a streaming window. The Bear and Baby Reindeer are exceptional television shows and connected with people. But other things have connected to people too.
Sure.
And so if those can't be the only 2 shows that people are throwing around as reference for what they want to do with the medium, I feel like when someone comes in, and there's a lot of this seems to be like notes for executives, but I think it's for creatives too, like, people should trust their passion more. honestly. And I feel like you probably see this too in podcasts, rewatchables, when you guys talk about things that you guys care about, even if it's not, a 9 on whatever on Rotten Tomatoes, people will respond to the passion more than the specifics.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's something that was happening maybe 2015, 16 to about 18, 19, 20 that we saw were technology companies starting streaming networks and kind of not knowing what to do with their money, so allowing people to kind of pursue passion projects.
Mm-hmm.
What those passion projects wound up being, whether you're talking about something like 000 on Amazon or I May Destroy You on HBO, can sometimes be construed as people want international global crime.
Right.
Or people want true stories from underrepresented voices who are talking about trauma. They want point of view, right? Like they want things to feel at once different, but interesting and familiar because that's what the best stories do. It's like you open up a book and you start reading Anna Karenina or you start reading Alan First and you're like, I'm immediately like thrown into this world and I'm thinking like these people and thinking about the choices that they're making and the circumstances that they're facing. But that's not necessarily like replicable on a cookie cutter way where you can just decide like a programming strategy against it.
Totally.
And so it's really interesting to think about a trend coming out of Andor being like more espionage sci-fi shows based on previously existing IP. Maybe that would be cool. I mean, it's not like we haven't had that though. Like one of the funny things that's been happening to us over the last 24 months, especially is we keep getting shows where we're like, is anybody else in a simulation where they're making TV shows just for you? And then you get the show and you're like, that was okay. That was pretty good.
Yep.
And it's not that there's anything wrong with the intention of the creation of the show, but making TV is really hard. Making anything is really hard.
Yeah.
And making stuff on this level starts to become kind of a like, can you hear Jimmy? Like, are you really like,
Look,
do you know what I mean? Like I guess my major point is it's about voice and it's about depth to me.
And that is the hardest balancing act. I mean, I didn't even put that on the list because I was trying to find a way to articulate it that I think you just did so well. Andor was about everything and one thing in every scene. And only old Jedi masters can do that. And I think that the lesson that I put that is kind of an offshoot of that is if you have to err on one side or the other as a creator or as a developer or whatever, always err on the side of people. Always.
Yeah.
Like you cannot say, very few people can do what Tony did and say, I'm going to make a show about revolution and then also have it hit as hard as it did. Because I think also if Tony was sitting with us, he'd say, well, no, I got to make a show about revolution, but the assignment was to make a show about Cassian Andor.
Yes.
And I feel I did that too. He is a good writer because he writes people first. I think that we keep getting farther away or forgetting the idea that if the show's not fundamentally about people, if it's about an idea, or God forbid, if it's just about a world, then it's a documentary or it's a video game.
Yeah.
You know, and there are people who love certain types of video games where you wander open space, universes, and you're like, wow, now I can see the sunset over this hill and
so
watch
easy
the
to
orcs
segue to Last of Us right now.
frolic or whatever. I know.
Yeah.
But and I'm happy. I'm happy for you. But that's not the same as drama.
Yeah.
Show me a person in that world and make me care about that person and then fill in the background. And that's essentially what makes something good.
I went back and started watching some of the older episodes for, obviously in researching the second season, talking to Tony, but just even before we had this conversation, I went back and especially watched the Aldani sequence of episodes from the first season and the Narkina season of episodes, or a sequence of episodes. And I was really struck by how brave it was to start Cassian where they start him. I mean, he's basically like a petty thief when you first begin the show. You get flashbacks that suggest his origins and like what difficulties he's faced, and obviously like when Marva comes into it, you have like a warmer feeling towards him. But if you start the show off just much the same way you start the movie off, when he's basically murdering someone to get some information, it gives you a real cold feeling about the character. And to watch him not only this is just really sturdy writing. Almost every single character, from the number one on the call sheet to people who are in the background of most of the first season, who then become major players in the second season, has an arc that you could easily diagram for people, where it's like he starts here and then he gets a promotion and then he gets a demotion and then he gets a promotion again. But then all this time, his relationship to his mother is like this. His relation to his lover is like this. His relationship to his work is like this. And Cassian is actually like, they should teach it in schools to start somebody who goes from like thief to mercenary to prisoner to spy to rebel captain.
To hero.
Yeah, to hero, to martyr is a pretty remarkable piece of writing.
I mean, it's unbelievable. And you think about like, first of all, when you were talking about all the people in the background, I was like, in the other geniuses you need to let cook are casting directors.
Yeah.
Because think about how much casting mattered on this show. Like every single person, I just believe is the single best person that could have played that part. And
I mean, you go back to the prison episodes. Every single face in that prison, you're like, who the fuck is this guy?
And that person has a story.
Yeah.
And like, there's a level of, I also always want to try and be fair-minded. Like the best stories are always just overwhelm you with specificity and decision-making. But that said, not every show has this budget. Not every show has this deep bench of imagination to draw from. But very few shows would give us an alien race in revolt and take the time to invent a language for them, the way they do on Gorman, you know, or the celebration and songs and mourning songs that are in the first season, you know, in the Aldani celebration or what happens at Ferrix at the end. Like this is what, if you're making a show about people in revolt or about a culture, then you have to service culture. Most TV shows don't have that luxury, but if we are moving into a bifurcated and maybe a healthier ecosystem where some shows take longer and some shows don't, and they're the right types of shows to take longer and not, like a medical drama probably shouldn't take $200 million in 2 years to make a season. But if you have a healthy balance in your diet as a network or streamer, some of that production money, dragons take a long time, but so does building real culture, real life, investing it with something more than just, you know, vis effects at the peak of its powers. Sure. The last thing on the list was just that I was thinking about when we talked to Tony, one of the things that really struck me was how much he brought from his movie career to writing for TV in a good way, in the sense that he's what he said to us about like the page numbers, page count.
He's always cutting.
He's always cutting because you have such little real estate. His response wasn't cracking his knuckles and being like, "Hell yeah, we're gonna take 8 episodes to get this thing moving." Now, obviously, there were budgetary and story concerns, but so much of TV is so poorly paced and plotted, and a lot of that comes back to the original sin of, oh, now we have room to explain everything. And that infects movies too, with prequels and origin stories and blah, blah, blah. But like, if you watch back on Andor, which you've been doing, I think you're seeing in real time how every single moment matters.
Oh, dude. I mean, I was actually
no fat.
thinking about this on my drive in. I was listening to Big Star, which is this band. I mean, you guys should all listen to Big Star. But on I think it's on Kangaroo, which is one of their big songs. Steve Cropper, who used to be in Booker T and the MGs, plays on it, right? And he plays like 6 notes. He apparently was just like, you guys are way too whacked out. Like, I can't do this. But plays like 7 notes on a Telecaster. And the writing on Andor is basically like that. It is what is the bare minimum that people need to have an emotion or an idea communicated to them, but has also got style and swagger. We don't really see Luthen that much in the second half of the second season. But think about how impactful his appearances are.
Yeah, every choice.
And we also, in every one of those scenes, are like, oh, that's what he's been up to.
And I think that it is, I mean, everybody's just making TV for streaming services while the world burns. I get it. But at the same time, I think that one bit of service that is incumbent on the creative industry is to do everything we can to try and re-educate people towards accepting uncertainty and nuance and shadow in art, and then maybe, God forbid, in life as well. But like, that is a fairly noble mission. I
Yeah.
think that art, I don't feel like I'm being any too big for my britches in saying it. I feel like that is what art does for us as humans in the world. And the fact that so much of the power of Andor comes from its silences, from its ellipses, from the space between episodes, between seasons, between scenes, is significant and meaningful. And in inexpert hands, that can be sloppy.
Yeah.
And it can leave you asking. But that sense that 2 pretty perfect seasons of TV has left us with, which is, oh my God, we wish we had more, but we are very satisfied. That's a very good place, I think, for people to leave a show.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. Did you want to talk a little bit about Last of Us, or does it almost feel like a bittersweet ending to the pod? I don't have a ton to say about this episode. A lot of what I said about the previous episode stands. I like this one less than the previous episode. I thought this one suffered a bit from TV stuff. From Jesse showing up at just the right moment, even though he had apparently been following them for weeks.
We don't know.
We're not really sure. Maybe we'll get more of an explanation about it. I think the way that they tell this story is sometimes like a thing will be confusing and then it will get like a flashback episode or an explanation. But I was just curious whether or not you were enjoying the Seattle experience.
God, just briefly for a moment, I was just flying. I was like the Superman
I almost
trailer.
don't want to end the pod like this. I know.
I can't believe you brought me there. Yeah, I mean, weirdly, this one bothered me less than the previous episode.
There you go, different strokes.
But mainly because it was definitely less ambitious, and it didn't have like the soaring Jeffrey Wright monologues that really, really, frankly, pissed me off. This episode was just more like revealed, I think, some of the central flaws of the show. You know, like I'm really not that invested in the teen buddy comedy romance that also involves shooting people and zombies. Like I don't buy it emotionally. Right. I'm kind of out on it. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And the arc of the Ellie character learning the limits of her own savagery feels exhausting and also boring to me.
I don't think there are any limits.
No, right. But that I don't really see the appeal of that. And I'll just circle back to like, you know, what I kind of had been saying, which is it's we've heard about gourmet cheeseburgers. Well, this is gourmet Walking Dead now. Which is very satisfying, I think, to people who like these shows. But it is a remarkable drop off, and one that I have sympathy for, considering what it was dropping off from. But the second episode, it didn't matter what I care or what I feel about zombie shows, or how I feel about Bella Ramsey's performance, or any of the other details that I bump against when I watch the show. That was an undeniable episode of television. It was so expertly made, and it was thrilling, and it was surprising, and it was engaging, and that wins every time. But when you drop down from that, and not every episode can be that, you're back down to
just like not every episode can be Nick Offerman in the first season. Yeah. I mean, I think
you drop down to the bare bones, and I'm like, frankly, it's not for me. This is the show.
The previous season had a lot of swagger. Like it had the way it opened with the talk show. It had
style.
The woman who was like, we have to bomb the city. Like those little flashbacks, those, you know, all the Texas stuff was incredible. I thought getting out of Boston and the beginning of that story was really quite striking. And you know, I've really enjoyed some Jackson stuff, but I think it definitely feels like it's stuck between gears right now. And, you know, you can't help it when you read online, like that just feels like the show is now geolocated for it feels like it's like not satisfying the game's fans.
Right.
I don't know if I find it so satisfying because it feels like it has to adhere to certain, like we have to put her in a room with 3 aliens that she then figures out a way out of, you know? And that a lot of that feels very video gamey to me, but you know, I mean, there's a couple more episodes left in this season. It does feel like it's also like the multiple seasons issue, like where it's like, well, we're going to be doing this for two more seasons probably. It is straining it a little bit.
Well, the other thing that was robbed from season 1 was
they didn't really do anything this episode, right? Like they kind of like...
Well, they ran around and we saw some new bosses for a video game level.
Right.
She played guitar again. We learned why. And then there's a lot of backfilling, which is decent.
She plays guitar and you say what?
You don't want to know what I say. But yeah, I mean, we learned the roots of Dina's savagery, you know? Like, okay, so that's some backfilling. That's fine.
I'm just personally, I assume none of you guys have a happy life.
I think that's fair.
It seems like it's a pretty fucked up world.
You don't feel like there was one like Montessori city that
Did
survived?
you think Dina was going to be like, I grew up in an incredibly warm, loving household with two parents.
And
nothing ever happened to us.
It was kind of boring,
Yeah,
honestly.
exactly.
But I found my own way. I got into art.
That's why I'm such a thrill seeker now,
I mean, the other thing that was robbed between seasons is a point and a purpose. Now, not all shows need an explicit endpoint, but the first season had the momentum of get this magic child out of the city and into the arms of doctors to save the world.
Psych.
That's pretty big stakes.
Yeah.
And this season's mission is we must avenge this guy. Must we? I mean, yeah, you're making the case emotionally and you're saying something about it, but that is a different set of stakes, and I don't think it's earning the same swag. I think swagger is well said for the first season that it had. It's also worth noting that it does appear that we're in for a standalone episode, and it looks like your Zaddy's back for a flashback. I'll say this. As a I don't even know if I've earned this title. I was going to say a casual fan of the show. I don't know if that's my correct designation. As much as I liked having Pedro Pascal on the show and I like watching him.
You don't want to drive back 15 miles to pick up something else. Yeah, I know what you mean.
What is left unsaid about that relationship, right? I mean, it's a lingering
I think it's
wound.
just the secret. It's the secret of what happened in Salt Lake City and whether what Ellie understands
because she
about
said,
that.
I know,
yeah,
right?
right. I mean, that's the suggestion from the Coming Soon.
What? Oh, did you watch the Coming Soon?
Yeah.
Do you do the work?
I just didn't turn off HBO Max before the trailer ran.
Well, that's where you're wrong. It was actually aired on Max.
That's true.
But this summer, it'll once again air on HBO Max. We didn't talk about it, but we should just also plant a little flag to the studio rules.
Yeah, we'll hit the studio on Tuesday. I want to do the studio. I would like to at least.
Should we wait for the finale though? When's the finale come? It's next week.
Yeah, and I also want to talk about 100-Foot Wave. We've got a couple of things coming soon too, like TV shows, Department Q, adults. There's some good stuff.
You also, I noticed you didn't save time for my Minecraft movie review, so I guess we'll have to push that till next week.
I want to do like a special Andy Goes to the Movies after Mission Impossible, where we can just have it all stretch out.
I can tell you about Friendship.
I know all about Friendship, lowercase f, because I do this pod with you. Thanks to Kaya, thanks to John. We will be back on Tuesday next week, but then reverting to our usual Monday, Thursday.
Have
schedule.
a great time getting away from me on my birthday. I love it.